How do you bring history alive for your students? Could you share an activity, strategy, or lesson that really worked?
Get a stamp that says top secret. As soon as you put top secret on an old brown envelope, what's going on? What's going on?
I have an activity that I call a sauce hot potato.
They all have 20 minutes before the air runs out and they have to complete a whole bunch of different challenges.
We'd act out one of the trials.
Role play where the students may be investigators for the United Nations.
All the Year 7 classes turn our school hall into a museum.
And you just play the video game or walk around the area and just get them to note down stuff.
Hi, and welcome to Hey History Teacher, a series of evidence-backed tips and advice from expert teachers to help you teach history at primary or high school. You'll hear from history teachers right across Australia. This is part 2 of our creative history teaching series, Getting Really Creative, Nor Tips from Teachers, with inspiring ideas and activities that take a bit more planning, but boy are they worth it. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back and listen. You'll hear a bunch of evidence around using creativity in the classroom, as well as some simple to intermediate examples that you can start doing tomorrow. I'm your host, Anna Clark, a Professor of History at the University of Technology, Sydney, and someone who's passionate about history and history education. We've teamed up with the History Teachers Association of New South Wales to make this professional development resource for you. And that's not all. On the Hey History website, download tip sheets for each topic and get links to resources mentioned. heyhistory.net. Let's go.
Let's find out.
Sources. They're an essential part of our history teaching, but how can we use them in a more creative way?
My name is Sarah Coleman. I am the Head of Humanities and Social Sciences at MacKillop Catholic College in Mount Peter, which is in far north Queensland, just south of Cairns. And I'm also on the management committee for the Queensland History Teachers Association, and I have co-authored a number of textbooks. When they were in Year 9, I created this activity on the causes of World War I. And basically what we did, I gave them a source package that was correspondence between the Tsar, the Kaiser, the King, all the major parties, Clemenceau, the whole bit. So they had all the letters and the telegrams. And I have an activity that I call a source hot potato. So they rotate, their analysis and they write down their prior knowledge and they pull all that stuff apart. And then they did a bit of a gallery walk and they had a bit of retrieval that they had to do with it. But once they'd done all of that, they created a group chat. So they all got the little faces of all the key players and a whole bunch of speech bubbles. And they had to turn all that historical information from the sources into, if all the leaders of Europe were in a group chat on the 4th of July, 1914, what would that have looked like? And it was hilarious. I had 6 different group chats by the end and they all put them up on the wall and they'd had the whole little moving dots, like someone's still writing a message. Franz Ferdinand has left the chat. And it's one of those things that they still talk about now in grade 12. They're like, can we make a group chat for this? I'm like, no, we don't have time. We've got an exam to prep for. Sorry, we can't do the fun things anymore. So that's probably one of my favourite things.
It's interesting how that activity has 2 completely different parts, and they work so well. And Source Hot Potato and Historical Leaders Group Chat could be standalone activities too. Here's another way to creatively use sources from Paul Foley.
I'd probably regard myself as an early career teacher. I've only been teaching 40 years, and that means I'm keen on learning. I think you have to be a lifelong learner as a history teacher. I've taught in country Victoria for 20 years, and now I'm teaching in metropolitan Adelaide. I'll find old books where it might be some military records, it might be a historical record, it could be some currency from the past, it might be a speech, and have old brown envelopes. Go to Officeworks and get a stamp that says top secret. As soon as you put top secret on an old brown envelope, what's going on? What's going on? And then put them in the students in groups. It's usually 3s, 4s, a perfect number. And, okay, item 1, and just have a number on the back of it, and they open it up, and it's a speech. It doesn't say who it's... Okay, what's the speech about? What historical period is it from? Who's the audience of the speech? All right, item number 2 is a map. Oh, what's the map of? Oh, it's in German, and it's, okay, it looks like part of France. And so, and that's that point. Don't intervene. And also, at this time, no laptops. Let's use some reasoning. Where does it fit? Where does it stay? Where does it reside in history? And then maybe some currency. It could be some stamps, some images of the stamps. You don't need the originals. It's a bit like the students with their tea-stained assignments. It doesn't matter. It's something physical in their hands. Then, okay, let's open up the laptops. What can you find? And then, of course, the answers happen so much more quickly. But then go to the next step. How useful are these documents for historians studying this period of history? What are their limitations? What other sources could we use?
Paul Foley has another activity with sources where the students make the puzzle and replicates a part of the Year 12 exam. Basically, students make an assessment task which helps them prepare for the real thing. This could apply to any year level.
It's a South Australian thing where in our Year 12 exam we have a sources analysis. 7 pieces of evidence with a brief introduction and a bit of a traditional format of comprehension questions at the start, then cross-reference questions, usefulness limitations, and a little mini essay using all the sources in response to a proposition. So I've been getting students now for years to make their own set of sources, up to 7, create their own questions using the formula, and then answering them. And the students now start to understand the task from inside out. But the searching for the sources is wonderful. And the very good questions, how many should I start with? Start with 9, start with 10. Then we'll sit together and that source, do you think that's doing enough with that question and matching the questions, the sources? There's that critical thinking. What constitutes a very good question? And how do you match the right sources, the very best sources you can find to that question? And what I love about that task, it has to be scaffolded, but at the outset, there's a bit of a fog. And I think this is the other thing important in history teaching. You will create fog in the classroom. There will be some, hang on, that's not how I remember it, some students will say, or why did that happen? There has to be some wrestling with it. You have to let the students wrestle with it and just keep following these guidelines. Remember what we went through this on the PowerPoint or explained on the whiteboard. Okay, all right, back we go. Go back to the fundamentals. And then when you see the clarity emerge, it's that light bulb moment. Next
up, using historical texts in a creative way that can just involve a few props. Here's David Boon, who's had a 36-year career in history education. He's taught from all of primary to Year 10 and has held a number of curriculum and professional learning roles too. In this example, David uses the transcripts of convict trials with primary school students.
And so each of the children had a convict, but we actually acted out the trials. But I allocated the trials based on their literacy levels as well and gave them all parts. So we would do that in the English learning block. We'd have reading in the afternoon. After reading, we'd act out one of the trials. It was only one hit. You just read through it and each person had a part. I was the magistrate. I had my gavel and I had the black cloth that you put on for the death sentence. And I would then sentence them to whatever they were being sentenced to, including one who was sentenced to death. And then community, but they loved that because you chose the kid you knew was going to respond to it. So I put the black cloth on my head, and so we acted all of that out. We then researched them through the database, so found out about them on the First Fleet database, and then secondary sources and researched their lives and followed them through to what happened to them. And in fact, they said, we have to do this in assembly. So we actually rehearsed one and did it in assembly.
You can act out a trial by using existing scripts, or students can hold the trial themselves. Natalie Fong uses this for teaching difficult histories.
And this is something I always try to do as a history teacher, encourage them to see different perspectives. And in that sense, try to be objective or balanced in the way that we approach some of these difficult histories. For example, the experiences of prisoners of war during World War II. We could just focus on the well-known experiences of Australian prisoners of war and things like Changi, Thai-Burma Railway, and those things are terrible and should be studied. But we also look at the experiences of the Japanese prisoners of war in Australia. So the Cary incident, where they were trying to escape and they were being shot at. So considering both sides, and the way we do that is a kind of role play where the students may be investigators for the United Nations. They are investigating whether either the Australian or Japanese government should be prosecuted for war crimes. So we start off looking at what is the UN definition of a war crime, and then the students will split into teams. So one team might be the prosecution of Australia for war crimes they potentially committed against prisoners of war, and another team might be prosecuting Japanese government for, again, atrocities that may have been committed that could be considered war crimes against prisoners of war. So they given some sources, primary and secondary, although they could also go and find their own, and they use the sources to build a case, which they then have to present either to the rest of the class or they might present it to another team.
I love how running a legal trial allows students to see more than one side of the story. We've reached halfway through the episode. Here's a summary of some of the tips on getting really creative with your history teaching.
If all the leaders of Europe were in a group chat on the 4th of July, 1914, what would that have looked like?
I've been getting students now to make their own set of sources.
We start off looking at what is the UN definition of a war crime, and then the students will split into teams.
Each of the children had a convict, but we actually acted out the trials.
And they open it up and it's a speech. What's the speech about? What historical period is it from? Who's the audience of the speech?
Welcome back. Let's hear from some more expert teachers and their advice on bringing history to life. Next up, it's a history escape room with Western Sydney teacher Chad Cary.
I am a history teacher from Casula High School in Sydney Southwest. I've been teaching here for 13 years. This is my second home. I used to come here as a student myself, so I don't really know too much different. Year 7 history, the students will walk into class. I'll be dressed up as an emperor for ancient China. They've been told that they've been trapped. My whole classroom's turned into the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi, and they all have 20 minutes before the air runs out and they have to complete a whole bunch of different challenges. The students can work collaboratively in little teams, source analysis tasks, writing tasks, key term definitions, all those sorts of things. So chronological order activities, all these key skills that we want them to learn in Year 7 in order to escape the tomb and find the secret passageway.
Chad's a big believer in sharing resources in the history teaching community, and there are links on the website to escape room resources, his Facebook group, plus his book Epic Escape Rooms with a step-by-step guide. Victorian teacher Ben Lawless uses existing computer games for source analysis.
Hi, my name is Ben Lawless. I'm a history teacher in Melbourne, Australia. I also do a little bit of teaching at University of Melbourne. So I'm an avid gamer and I play Assassin's Creed, and we teach ancient Greek history, and so I bought Assassin's Creed. I bought a $6,000 gaming laptop and brought it into class. So Assassin's Creed from the ancient Egyptian version, Assassin's Creed Origins. They've kind of turned the video game into more of a role-playing game. Now, each of these games now has a massive team of historians who make sure that everything's like historically accurate. And so we were going through the history, the safe version of the game in class, doing that with students, and they were loving it. You know, I printed off a thing, it's called Historical Video Game Secondary Source Analysis, and I'd had all these headings, like clothing, roles, geography, and say there was like 15 things, and you just play the video game or walk around the area and just get them to note down stuff. Oh yeah, it's really rocky. Yeah, you're right, it is. Whoa, there's heaps of little bays. Oh, it must be warm because everybody's wearing togas. Oh look, there's wild animals wandering around. There was no better way for them to see what it was really like in ancient Greece, because the massive team of like 50 historians or whatever it was, you know, they made ancient Athens look as close to what we believe that ancient Athens actually looked like, right down to the paths going up to the Parthenon, all that sort of carry on. And then We got on breakfast TV. A reporter came into my classroom and sat in the front row while I ran a lesson where they were doing secondary source analysis of a video game. It was awesome.
Video games and the classroom. It's an unusual combination, but this school here in Melbourne is showing just how well it can work. So we're putting it to the test, and I'm going back to school for the day.
All the buildings?
Yep, so ruined buildings, yes.
It's just before lunch at this school in Victoria's North. We're learning about ancient Greece using Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed Discovery Tour.
I use it as an engagement tool to engage modern learners who've got such a different experience of AV type stuff that it just needs to be way more next level.
Australian research shows video games can improve creativity, problem solving and literacy skills.
Check out Ben Lawless and his students on TV in the show notes of this episode on our website, heyhistory.net. Ben Lawless adds that learning through play can be especially useful for teaching difficult histories.
Learning through play, I think, is something, especially for, you think about uncomfortable histories or difficult histories. When people are in play mode, they're willing to take more risks because there's an avatar in the game who's doing it. It's not them doing it. You know what I mean? It's my little meeple. It's my little owl baby, or it's me in the game doing all this stuff, not me in real life. And so I can take risks, be vulnerable, and it's not as, you don't feel it internally as much.
From escape room challenges and computer games to putting on actual events like trials. Natalie Fong's school has an annual humanities festival every year. Maybe your school could start one. Here's Natalie.
We have a humanities festival one day a year where all students and teachers really are encouraged to dress up as something historical or geographical, and that's fun. So the humanities festival, and the students have the opportunities to dress up. Yes, that year one of the students that won the prize came dressed as the plague, as in the actual germ that causes the plague. I think it's called Yersinia pestis, something like that. And some of the students really put a lot of time and effort into their costume. Some of them like being able to come as a group. So, for example, a group of senior students came dressed up as a group of characters from a manga, and cultural history is also an important part of history. And it's these kind of experiences too that help bring the school community together. There's a best dressed student in each year level and also the best dressed staff member.
Chad Cary also uses events as a way for senior levels to present to younger students, like a senior class studying ancient Rome.
And the big bread and circuses event was they need to learn as much as they could so they could put this ultimate spectacle on in the middle, in the quad, and we needed to entertain a Year 7 class. So again, they were doing a whole bunch of different challenges. They were working out specific gladiator moves. They organised their own events. Of course, it was all based on pretty intense research. For my senior students, I like to do festival days. So for Sparta, we'll organise it a couple of weeks in advance. We'll all bring contributions of relevant food. We'll learn all about their leisure activities that they used to do, and we'll sort of incorporate that into a massive spectacle that we'll have out the front of the school. Dual beneficial, because you'll see a lot of the students walking around the school looking at us, trying to think, what on earth are they doing? And then when it comes to subject selection evening and stuff like that, I think it's instilled in their memory that they want to be involved.
And for younger students, there's an event with less pressure to perform in front of others and instead make a display for the rest of the school.
So in Year 7, we do a community event. We call it Evening with the Ancient Greeks, where all the Year 7 classes turn our school hall into a museum. It's a big part of their teaching and learning program, and it becomes an assessment task for them. But every time we give them a couple of weeks to do that, going into the hall and seeing what they're capable of is it's remarkable.
Our final tip is from North Queensland teacher Sarah Coleman, who you heard at the start of this episode. This tip isn't about teacher creativity, it's about encouraging creativity in students when the syllabus has room.
So student agency is really important. I think where we've got flexibility in the curriculum, particularly if you're giving students an inquiry assessment, a task like that, even if it's a group task that's part of your learning and teaching, something that gives them that bit of flexibility and that choice. And it might not even necessarily be choice in terms of what they're doing, although that's one way of doing it, but it might be how they present it. They might make a video or a model or, I don't know, poster. But yeah, I tend not to do that one so much because that's a lot of organisation. But we tend to go a lot with flexibility of topics, and that tends to work really well.
Students getting creative too. I love it. To jog your memory, here are those tips from the second half of the episode.
Historical video game secondary source analysis.
They all have 20 minutes before the air runs out and they have to complete a whole bunch of different challenges.
We have a humanities festival one day a year.
Learning through play.
Student agency is really important.
In the next episode, get expert advice from teachers on how to teach history in all its complexity. I'm Anna Clark, and you've been listening to Hey History Teacher. If you haven't heard Creative History Teaching Made Easy, go back and listen to that one first. And there are 6 other episodes for you in this series, from difficult histories to great history teaching, advice for teachers new to history, connecting to country in schools and syllabus, teaching history in all its complexity, and teaching the Australian Wars. A huge thanks to all the teachers we spoke to for this series.
Sarah Coleman,
Ben Lawless,
Paul Foley,
Chad Cary,
Natalie Fong,
and David Boon.
I'd also have the same name as a very famous Australian cricketer.
Get a tip sheet summary of this episode on our website, heyhistory.net, and follow Hey History in your podcast app. This episode and the whole professional development series is funded by the History Teachers Association of New South Wales. Special thanks to Jonathan Dallimore. Hey History Teacher is produced by Jane Curtis at UTS Impact Studios. The executive producer of this series is Anna Clark. This podcast was made on Gadigal country in Sydney, Australia. Thanks for listening.